Miami-Dade County residents, we're about to have the most important election season in our history. And no, it's not going to be just about Biden and Trump and whoever's running for office, but specifically the impact that we're going to be seeing here in Miami-Dade County. I've been lucky enough to network and communicate with different politicians in this space. And there's one election that's so vital that we all need to be watching. And it's who's going to be the sheriff of Miami-Dade County. And today I have a very special guest and a candidate that's running and has a very strong position. His name is Mario Knapp. Mario, it's a pleasure having you here today. So I want to give the residents an idea. We'll get into the nitty gritty, but give us a little backstory about yourself. How did you get here? And what is really motivating you to run in this race?
So obviously my name is Mario Knapp. I'm a product of a single mom and grandmother, which is why I respect single moms so much, because I recognize the sacrifices that my mom and my grandmother went through. We're very, I'll say, I'm not going to say we were poor, but we were definitely not financial. But despite that, I think they did an excellent job. My brother and I have good values and stuff, and we graduated from Coral Gables Senior High in 1991, the broke part, not the rich part. But shortly after that, we went through the academy. We were the first two brothers to graduate from the same academy class in Miami-Dade. Now, after that, I think I had a really gifted career in the sense that I was always at the wrong place at the right time. None of my career was planned. I held every civil service rank in the Miami-Dade Police Department, which means I was an officer. I was on the SWAT team. I was an instructor in the SWAT team. I was a sergeant. I worked narcotics. I worked uniform. I was the subject matter expert for all matters related to use of force in Dade County. And I did that since the rank of sergeant, which is pretty significant. Then I became a lieutenant. I was the commander of the Port of Miami for some time. And then I was the commander of the Robbery and Invention Detail, which is probably our most high-profile violent crime suppression initiative in Dade County. And I did that for 5 years. And then they brought me back to the training bureau. And after that, I became a captain. I was a captain in 5 different areas in Miami-Dade. I was a captain in the Kendall District. I was a captain in the Northside District. I was a captain at the training bureau. I was a captain of the Warrants Bureau, and then I became the chief of communications, I acted as the chief of communication for Miami-Dade. And then I got promoted to major, and I was the major of what's called the Special Patrol Bureau. So what's unique about that job is that most majors in Miami-Dade would be almost like the equivalent to the structure of a police chief in a city of Coral Gables, Miami Beach, that kind of thing. What was unique about my position was I didn't have a geographical area. We provided service to every single corner of Miami-Dade from the road all the way up to Broward, because I supervised the SWAT team, the bomb squad, the aviation unit, so that's all the airplanes, all the helicopters, the Marine Patrol, so all the boats, all the canines, motors, divers, the incident management team, which is the reason why I was the operations commander at the Surfside building collapse, and all what we call special events, which is every major special event in Dade County. That's every Dolphin game, every Marlin game, the Super Bowl when it comes into town, F1 when it comes into town, Ultra, Rolling Loud, all those. And then we also have pockets of Key Biscayne, Fisher Island, and all of transit. So we have a general investigations unit there. So now back to the original question, which is why I'm running for sheriff. And that is that I being at the wrong place at the right time in my entire career, I feel lucky that I only interviewed for one assignment in Miami-Dade, and that's in the SWAT team back in the 90s. Everywhere else, I've been kind of told where to go. I've been kind of recognized as a problem solver. And I'm looking around. I took a private industry job. I did that for a year. And I was basically dealing with police chiefs and trainers all over the country, all over the world. And we have an 18% resignation rate, or an increase in resignations and early retirements in law enforcement. Officers no longer feel supported. They don't feel supported by the politicians. They don't feel supported by their very own police chiefs, who don't have a voice because they're reporting to a politician that has the authority to fire them. And so we're at a place, and I have a 17 and a 13-year-old boy and girl, and we're at a place right now in South Florida where we can very easily turn into Chicago. We can turn into San Francisco. We can turn into New York. And when we live in a society where there's no consequences for criminal behavior, there's no predictability, there's no stability, there's no community that can survive that. And I've been lucky enough to be, like I said, at the wrong place at the right time. And I've built over the years the experience, not just administrative and command experience, but operational experience with boots on the ground with the men and women in this department. And we need to kind of steer the rudder back in the right direction to actually have stability here in Dade County.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because it's a problem that a lot of residents think about, and especially with real estate. If you're looking to buy a property here,
right,
and your biggest concern is somebody going to move into my unit? Am I going to have a homeless person in front of my home? How can I remove it? And with the amount of wealth that's transferring over here, I mean, any resident that's watching this, we all know how quickly 4 years things can change. And there's a bill that was recently signed by DeSantis for squatter removal.
Yes.
And I don't know the specific name of the bill, but the bill relates into they cannot be camping in public places.
Right.
And then also those who are able to squat in people's homes. How is that going to be enforced under your administration, and how can we prevent that so property owners and business owners feel empowered and don't feel that the government's against them?
Well, and that's the thing that, first of all, we have to acknowledge several things there, that one thing affects the other, which affects the other. This is like a chain link, right? Or a link of chains. I don't know English and forgot Spanish. But the moral of the story is everything affects something else. If you remember back in COVID, we had a moratorium on evictions, something as simple as that. Now, obviously, that made total sense at the time for an amount of time because we didn't know what we were dealing with COVID. But then it turned out that if you were a property owner that had apartments for rent or condos for rent or houses for rent, you were no longer allowed to. So you were going to swallow all of that debt, and again, it was a moratorium set by politicians that we're going to keep people from being evicted. Well, it was responsible at the beginning, probably, but how long did that last where people actually, investors were losing their property? And we cannot punish people that are trying to do better for themselves just for political expediency, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that just on the eviction side, there was a lot that should have been done sooner. We should have opened that up a lot sooner. The beauty of having a sheriff's office in relation to a police department is that the sheriff does not report to a politician. And so even if they wanted to put something like that, we could choose not to enforce it or to enforce it, right? And there would be no political influence there. The same thing with the squatters. Look, I think it's unfair to have people that own properties that this is how they make their living, and I don't care how rich or poor they are. If this is how they make their living and this is their business, we need to protect those interests also, and we need to we need to support them in that. It's inconceivable to me that we're going to allow anybody to just break a door lock, go in, and they are legally protected to stay there. That's irresponsible.
This is the first time that we're going to have a sheriff, and it's going to be independent from county government.
Right.
Whoever were to come into this position, many residents are not thinking about it, but there's fiscal impacts, there's budget issues. What would happen if there's a mayor and a police chief or police sheriff that they don't agree or see eye to eye with each other on a specific issue?
Well, the way this is supposed to be set up is independent of people. Nobody's going to agree all the time. You know what I mean? We have to acknowledge that. Nobody's going to agree all the time. I've had bosses that I didn't agree with. There's going to be issues. Assume that the current mayor stays in office. There's going to be things that we don't agree on, and that's okay. But the whole idea behind going back to a sheriff's office is to decentralize that amount of power that she had at the time. Now, remember, it's not just us. It's the property appraisal's office, the tax collector, the supervisor of elections. All of those constitutional offices are being, decentralized from her control so that they have their own constitutional office. So it's a way of redistributing the power, right? Or redistributing the authority of the office. So it's really important. Now, are we going to get along all the time? Probably not. But at the end of the day, we have to live in a society where we all work together. We're all going to be elected officials. We're all adults. We all recognize the need to put the Miami-Dade residents first. And that's what I think is so important about this office, is getting the right person in the office that, number one, recognizes that, but number two, isn't going to take personal every single disagreement that we're going to have.
And I think that's important that right now, especially in our society, we're seeing that there is, at least for many people I speak to, there's a lot of confusion out there.
Right.
You know, and at the end of the day, I think we have to be grown-ups in the room, say, hey, let's move forward. How can we serve the people of Miami-Dade County? And let's move forward so we can have a better, brighter community, but also not creating inequality for those who are currently here. Right. And that's the issue, where many people feel that the transition that's happening here, and the residents that live in this community, that the future Miami is being built on the skeleton of those that have laid the foundation for everybody that's here.
Yeah, I can see that in several different ways. Like, there's a lot of arteries to take that. But one thing that you said is the confusion for the transition. That's actually being done by design. And I think not only do I think it's unethical, but I think it's unfair. And not only to the residents, but to the employees. And this is what I mean. So just kind of something you said earlier, just a kind of a small correction. We have had a sheriff's office here in Miami-Dade. There's 67 counties in the state. Every single one, up to and including Miami-Dade, has historically had a sheriff's office. Every single one. What happens is between 65 and 66, there was a corrupt official. There was a corrupt sheriff. There was grand jury indictments. He goes to jail. Prostitution, money laundering, all kinds of fraud was going on. He goes to jail. At the time, what ended up happening was the government couldn't risk having another election and having an undetected corrupt guy from the same organization get elected. So the way they fixed that was they changed the charter to reflect the idea that it's going to be selected by the county manager at the time. Now it's the mayor. We're going to bring someone, and they brought someone from the outside because they figured we're going to bring somebody who doesn't have an uncle, sister, or brother here, no influence, no ties in Miami, somebody clean. And they brought a guy over. The guy's name was Wilson Purdy. He comes in to the office, takes office, and basically cut heads. He cleaned the department. The department was known as the Public Safety Department back then, appointed by the mayor. Now, what ends up happening is that structure stayed intact through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s when I came on, and then everybody just stopped paying attention. It worked. Till about 2018, it went to vote because people recognized that there was just too much political influence. Right now, by charter, whoever is sitting as mayor is actually the sheriff, whoever's mayor, which means that the mayor today it happens to be Cava, whoever it is years later or whoever it was before, literally has the authority to tell the police director, go investigate that guy, but don't investigate this guy. I know these people, investigate there. And if you don't like it, you're fired. They literally have the authority to say that. And that's what's happening in a lot of the police departments throughout the country. Right?
And how can we prevent a situation here that we have another corrupt sheriff?
And obviously that possibility always exists, right? But one of the things that I want to do for sure is I want to bring back a public corruption unit that's independent, not reporting to the politicians. So I don't care if you're a police officer, a police chief, a politician, a commissioner. If there's allegations of corruption, there should be an independent body that's going to be free to investigate it, and the cards fall where they may. Now, going back to the question, though, what if there is, and it's detected? Obviously, they'll be investigated and charged federally if they have to be, but they will be charged. But what if you're unhappy with your sheriff? Well, you have somebody to blame. So what I continue to tell people is I don't want power. I don't want authority. I want responsibility. I want to take responsibility for everything the sheriff's office does or doesn't do. And I will take all the responsibility on my shoulders. But, you can tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to do it. That's what continues to happen in politics. That's the influence that politicians continue to have, and it's negative influence on police departments.
Now, there's a major problem that we have in Miami-Dade County around associations. And there's countless people that have reached out to me protesting that their association is scamming them or robbing money. Situation, for example, the Hammocks, where the association board members created their own intricate system where they were funneling funds from that association into the pockets of their family members to, at the end of the day, they became millionaires. Yeah. They finally got caught. But what about the thousands of associations that are out there? What can we do, or what do you plan to do with this association to prevent that type of fraud?
Right. So I've been working on this for months, on that very specific issue. Unfortunately, and I hate to say this, but unfortunately, we in Dade County are the holy grail for all kinds of fraud. From everything, from real estate fraud to medical fraud to pharmaceutical fraud to, and now this is the new flavor of the month. I've already sat down with several of the senators and state reps that have written legislation over it already. There's plenty of legislation that I'm trying to advocate for, but in reality, there's one sentence that I want in the law. And I tried to get it into this last legislative session. And ironically, you have other candidates that now all of a sudden see this as a problem because they're hearing us talk about it. But there's only one sentence that I need. And the sentence in there is a mutual aid agreement clause that allows any sheriff's office in the state of Florida to investigate and conduct audits under the purview of the DBPR. That's it. That's all I need, because we're going to start a full-time, and notice I said a full-time section, not a task force. We're going to start a full-time investigative section for home association frauds with 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 8 detectives, and possibly 12, depending on what the need is going to be, but I expect it to be between 8 and 12 detectives that are solely dedicated just to home association fraud, because that is a very intricate type of investigation. You have to know the DBPR rules. The problem that we're sitting on right now is the DBPR has rules, not laws. It says home association president will not do this. Okay, but what if they do? It doesn't say whether it's a 3rd-degree misdemeanor. It doesn't say what the what law they're breaking. Again, they're rules, not laws, and that's something that we need to fix.
And that's a major problem. Just think about $2 million out of that association, and then the other one. So let's say the task force gets created. How would that structure look like, or what type of funnel would that have to be created for those type of complaints to come through? Would that come directly to your office, or would that have to go to the state of Florida, the DBPR, or how
no,
would that?
So part of my rationale behind making a full-time unit, but also, or section, but also the request for the mutual aid agreement clause is because we shouldn't have to wait in Dade County. We shouldn't have to wait for the DBPR. The DBPR doesn't have the resources to do it. They're not really an investigatory entity, right? So they don't have the authority to really investigate. They can audit and review papers and documents, but they're not going to grab, and remember, in the absence of real laws describing what the president can do and what they can't do, we have to look at what they're doing and then cross-reference that with a criminal act in our state statutes, because there are no state statutes that are specific enough to really nail down some of the home associations. So remember, when I say that I want that clause, I want the clause for us to start doing the audits, for us to be able to start working already and get those people, but we are going to advocate heavily for new legislation. Part of what I keep telling the senators and the state reps is, I realize that you have well-intentioned, you're very well-intentioned in trying to write law, but if you don't see how they're committing the crimes, you're writing laws that are going to be non-enforceable, right? We have to work this backwards. We have to see how they're breaking the law and then say, okay, let's write laws against this and work it backwards, And
I think that makes sense, because the way that it is now, like, there's no process. I've dealt with so many associations.
Right.
They don't have paperwork. They don't have documents. They have 0 reserves.
Right.
They have no money established. And now that's a major problem across the state of Florida, where homeowners feel that the state has left them there because now out of nowhere, I bought my place. I live on a fixed income. The association board out of nowhere should have been doing what they were supposed to do and maintain the building, not to pay a special assessment. But how do I know that general contractor or that engineer or whoever they're hiring to do these cost analysis, how do I know they're not going to get,
And that goes deeper. I don't know if you know this, but 2/3 of the buildings in Miami-Dade County are over 30 years old. Now, that may not mean anything in general to most people, because they're forgetting that, remember, after Surfside and everything, we have the 40-year recertification. Here's the problem. Well, I don't want to give up let's just put it this way. That's going to become a huge problem. I don't want to give home association people an idea of what they can do, right? In other words, I don't want to exacerbate the problem, but I will tell you that in itself is going to be a huge problem that we're already forecasting. So we have to be really prepared. But one of the other things that's happening is, the other day I made a comment. I've posted a lot about this. And so we have a lot of, followers and supporters that go back and forth. But one of the interesting things was I mentioned we don't have laws, we don't have the proper vehicle to be able to enforce these things, but we're going to do it once we, establish a unit. And an attorney writes on there, no, we do have the vehicle, we just have, listen to this, we just have a lot of residents that are lazy and don't want to pay the money for an investigation. Okay, so if you frame that right there, you can already see that there are attorneys that are cannibalizing these very same people, asking them to pay for investigations. Well, here's my message, and I'll say it to the camera. No victim should have to be paying for an investigation of any kind. That's what the sheriff's office is for.
And that's important because these association board members are using funds against their own residents.
Oh, yes. They're writing they're writing fines. It's so complicated, and the way they've built the web, right? The web that they've weaved, how we say all the time, it's really intricate, and we need people that really understand every aspect of again, not only the HOA rules, but the DPPR rules, and that's the only way we're gonna do it, and have dedicated officers that do nothing but that.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to have maybe, just a suggestion, maybe some financial, maybe a CPA to review it, to have certified audit on that.
Oh, for sure. There are people who do audits. I forget the term right now, but yeah, that's exactly how forensic audits.
Forensic audit.
Those are done.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense that you're paying $1,000 and then out of nowhere, you can't. Now they raise it again another $1,000, which is happening. And you brought something very important. Yeah, those 40 years recertifications and all that. Those are going to be...
That's going to open up a huge can of worms probably in the next 2 to 3 years.
So then that's going to exacerbate the already, the big issue that we're having here in the condo market.
Right.
Which it hasn't started 100% yet because it's being propped up by the migration that we're seeing here.
Right.
But residents, unfortunately, those living on fixed income, they're going to be in a very tight spot right now. Right. And we're starting to see condo buyouts happening where these developers are coming in. Actually, there was... last month, there's an issue around the condo buyouts. So it's been prevalent now. Let's see if that even gets exacerbated even more. But I want to ask you a question because I had somebody from my community reach out to me and ask me this. Their biggest concern right now is the amount of people moving here and how can they guarantee their safety for their children. So you're getting residents that are coming here from California, from New York, from other parts of the world, and we have guns. There's a lot of freedom here compared to other countries. How can a resident who puts their kid in public school feel confident that our police system is going to actually protect their children?
Right. Well, number one, it needs to improve. I mean, there's a lot of tweaks that we have to make as an agency. Remember when I mentioned that there's an 18% increase in officer resignations and early retirements? The reason why that becomes important to the general public is because when you have police officers that are scared of doing their own jobs, they're no longer in a hurry to get to your house. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The risk is too high for them. And unfortunately, I'm not saying it's right. This shouldn't be happening, but it is. And it's happening because of this very irresponsible methodology that came up called defund the police, which I thought, when you look at it, it's excellent marketing. They did a good job in marketing that entire thing, but it's all based on, or at least 90% of it is based on lies. And that affects us totally. So we got to get back to number one, we got to make uniform patrol a priority, and it's not. And when I say uniform patrol, that is what directly correlates with public safety. Crime is dependent on two things. Number one, the opportunity to commit the crime, and number two, the risk associated with doing so. And that's from the perspective of the bad guy, not the good guys, right? So how do we reduce the opportunity to commit the crime? They need to see more police on the street. And how do we raise or maximize the risk with the crime? That's two things. It's number one, more officers on the street, and number two, public relations, the relations between us and the community.
And why do you think the PR has deteriorated so bad?
Well, I have to take some responsibility for, when I say I mean we as an industry and law enforcement. we have not done the best in the law enforcement industry to communicate and to open our doors with the public. And we do pretty good in schools, but we can do better. And I've got plans to do that. But I'm going to give you an example. I was the subject matter expert for use of force in Dade County. So what does that mean? That means that not only was I writing the policy, I was writing the training, and I was also defending those policies on depositions, on professional opinions to internal affairs, professional opinions to the county attorney's office, and stuff like that. And sometimes you in defending the policies, you actually have to go against the officer if they mess up. So as a subject matter expert, one of the things is you have to be really centered on your credibility, right? Credibility becomes important because once you lose credibility once, that's it. You're done. So I mentioned that because a lot of the cases that we had are built on misnomers or lack of communication or people just interpreting what they thought they saw. Why? Because we didn't do the job of putting the information out there before the incident, right? Mm-hmm. The example I was going to give you, we rolled out tasers years ago. We're talking like in 2003. We rolled out tasers. We started a pilot. We were putting them out there. And when I said to I was a sergeant back then, I said to one of my captains and majors, I said, listen, I think we need to go to the public. We need to bring the media in. We need to explain to people what it is that we're doing because I think they'll agree with us. The response I got was the shoulders crossed and said, we're the police department. We don't owe anybody anything. We don't teach tactics. And I'm like, okay, not a good idea. Then we had a few controversial incidents. Back then we had a director named Bobby Parker. And he's a guy that I would run into a burning building for. But the reason why is because he was one of the last executives that we had. When I say executive, I mean not a police chief, but an actual executive that ran it like the way I thought it should be run. I spoke to him one day and he says, how's it going? I said, no, we have all these controversies and I think we need to go to the media. He says, why? I said, well, because the doubts that people have and the idea they have in their head, it's because we didn't give it to them. So they're making it up as they go. So he says, go ahead and do it. He gave me the authority. We brought in Willard Shepard. I don't know if you remember, Willard Shepard is I think he was Channel 10 at the time. Mm-hmm. We brought him in. I exposed him to the taser. And after that, the media became really positive towards the taser. But here's the thing, and here's the important part of that entire message. The reason why the public now became positive towards the taser is because now they understood not what we were using, an electronic control device that delivers 50,000 volts of electricity, but why we were using it. We were trying to minimize police shootings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So more important than what we're doing is why we're doing it, and we haven't done a good enough job in getting in front and telling people why it is that we do what we do.
So the issue that I've been seeing a lot of is there's not a lot of good police officers, mm-hmm. and the positive things they do in the community is not being reflected out there in the realm of social media. And it's unfortunate because the things you guys do, you can't even put it down in paper, the amount of things that you guys do. But the issue that I have is this. Those police officers that shouldn't be in the force, mm-hmm. that are just there collecting a paycheck, right. who are just waiting, maybe they feel unmotivated, they're going to wait for the last minute to come and go into the building to save somebody. Right. How do we hold those officers that are not doing their job for the public accountable? Because if they're in a union, for you to fire them, they're practically protected for life.
Right.
So if they're not doing their job and they're just sitting by idle, collecting overtime or whatever, how can we, or what's your plan to hold them accountable? Because if there's a bad apple there, that's going to rot in the whole bunch, right?
Right.
So what is your thought process on how to handle that?
Yeah, so I could go a few angles, but I'll take it the short route. The beauty of being a sheriff's office is we don't have to placate to the politics. Why do I say that? Because I can tell you a lot of scenarios where there are people that should have been reprimanded. There are people that should have been disciplined and weren't disciplined because they know someone who knows someone who knows someone. So it's too much red tape. I agree with you to a degree. I agree with you with the union thing. The unions are always going to protect their members. They're expected to. We know that. But I had a relationship with our union where I called them, or they called me and said, are you going to discipline this person? And I'm like, yeah, and here's why, because of this and this and this and this and this. And now they knew that I had the credibility to now say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll let that one go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it is about credibility. It is about holding people accountable, but you have to have not just the aptitude to do it fairly, but you got to do it all across the board. Because like I said, credibility is important. And if it's someone you know, it's almost like you have to discipline them more because people are watching.
And that's the thing. And people can tell now. And everyone's watching now in our society. When you have a phone, that's it. You're being tracked.
Exactly.
Now I want to get to something that's maybe a little more, maybe a little sci-fi, but it's happening right now, and that's AI. How is Miami-Dade County, or what would the police department here do in incorporating some type of AI where we're not giving up our liberties or becoming a 1984 scenario here where we're being observed and all that with this technology, but we are. But we are, though. We are. Unfortunately, we are.
Yeah.
What is the plan? Are you guys going to implement AI, and how will that look like in your department?
Yeah. So for example, how are we going to implement AI? I think we have to leverage technology like everything else. We have ShotSpotter. We have drones. We have license plate readers. We have to leverage technology. But when you talk about AI, I'm thinking more specifically about like facial recognition and stuff like that. We have to implement that because that minimizes the amount of resources and time that we need to successfully process a case. So we're going to use everything and we're going to leverage technology as much as possible. If you're asking me how I can think of right now as I sit here, how we can use ChatGPT, to write reports, that's probably not what we want to do because we want the human element, to write reports, especially on criminal cases. But if we can use technology to reduce the amount of time it takes, for example, to put together a lineup to present to a victim or witnesses, then we're going to do that. And just a quick example of why sometimes politics shouldn't be involved. Years ago, about 2 years ago, our department was trying to look at facial recognition technology. And we were already looking at bids. We were already going through the PO process. And from the mayor's office, we were told, absolutely not, you can't look at it anymore. And so the idea was, it's not going to be good for the community because they're going to feel like they're being watched. And we're like, wait a minute. We don't stop using cars because we think we're going to have a bad driver. We train our drivers to use it correctly, but we don't abandon the technology, right? And so that happened. So we're probably about a year slower in adopting facial recognition than we should have been.
And do you think that facial recognition is actually going to do anything?
Yes.
You think it's going to prevent?
I don't think there's going to be ways that we can use it for prevention once we have identification already. But I think that it's going to help us out a lot to kind of narrow the scope, narrow the field of view when we're, in other words, it's going to show us where to shine the light when we're looking for a specific subject that we have pictures of.
So what if somebody has an existing criminal history and, they've served their time? Will that AI have built-in biases towards those type of people?
No, because remember, you're going to set the way you use it. AI is going to have a capability, but you decide how you're going to deploy that capability. So if you have a criminal past and there's somebody that matches your description, at the end of the day, for example, for the use of a lineup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a guy, blue eyes, goatee, that haircut, the whole thing, come up with 6 people. At the end of the day, it's going to be the victim or the witness that identifies you, not AI. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's always going to be checks and balances on how we deploy the technology, but that doesn't mean don't deploy the technology. That just means be careful. Something, minimal, but it used to be that we can run anybody's tag. I heard stories in the 70s and 80s when you saw a pretty girl driving and they'd be like, hey, let's get her number. And they run her tag, find out where she lives, knock on her door. Let's get, that kind of thing. Remember, that was before my time. But now you can't do that. Now, because every single time you run a tag, you have to justify why you're doing it. And there's inquiries that come back and say, hey, on this day and time, you ran this tag. And if you don't have a valid reason, you're going to get written up. You're going to get disciplined and reprimanded. Does that make sense? So that doesn't mean we abandon the use of being able to run tags. It's vital in law enforcement.
But it creates more checks and balances. That's the way you're seeing the AI.
Yeah, we have to do it in a way. At the end of the day, as a sheriff, my job is going to be to protect people's constitutional rights. And we're going to make sure that whatever we do, we're going to be a principle-based agency, not a scenario-based agency. So, yeah, we're going to go out, we're going to put we're gonna solve crimes. We're gonna put criminals behind bars. We're gonna make every neighborhood safer. But every single operation, every decision, every arrest that we make is gonna be a calculus. Is this fair? Is this respectful? And is what we're doing gonna violate public trust? And if it satisfies that calculus, then we're gonna continue doing it.
So what is your future, or where do you see the future of Miami-Dade County going in the next 10 years?
I think we're going to see a safer city. I think we're going to see a lot more, or a safer county. I think we're going to see a lot more uniform patrol. I'm not an economist, so I don't know how much we're going to be able to improve people's quality of life in terms of the HOA Association fraud and everything else, but I think it will have an impact. I think it's going to improve things there. One of the other things is, remember, the public corruption unit. I think you're going to see Miami right now is tired of the same recycled politicians, the same names that we've all heard for the last 10, 20 years. You hear those names continuing to come up. You have commissioners fighting. You have commissioners getting arrested. You have all of these things. Miami is tired of that, and especially for a position like sheriff. So I think we're going to see a lot more trust, I think, in knowing that there's going to be a totally independent body and vehicle designed specifically to make sure that every resident in Dade County knows that if there's allegations of corruption, we're gonna investigate it independently.
And that's very important. And what do you think is the biggest issue right now that you see in Miami-Dade County? And if you're elected into office, how would you address that?
There's so many issues. There's a lot of issues. But the very first thing we have to do is make sure that whatever adjustments we make in the department, it does not compromise public safety. You know what I mean? So the very first thing is going to be safety. Then it's going to be investigations. Then it's going to be, everything else. So safety is number one. So violent crimes, that's what we need to attack first. And remember, I even mentioned it, and I was going to get into it earlier, but when you talked about the transition, I started to talk about how a lot of this is being messaged on purpose to scare people. Remember that?
Yeah.
I'll just say it because it's
no, bring it up. That's important.
And the reason why it's important is this. We have always been a sheriff's office, and I've gone around almost on a tour doing this because it's this important. If you look at my badge, now remember, I've had 5 of these, okay? I've had 5 of these because I've been an officer, I've been a sergeant, I've been a lieutenant, I've been a captain, I've been a major. What does it say under major there?
It says sheriff's office. It says retired Miami-Dade County.
Right.
Deputy sheriff.
Deputy sheriff. So the reason why I mentioned that is because every single badge in Miami-Dade Police Department says this, because we've always been a sheriff's office. So you're going to hear a lot of politicians, and you're going to hear, ironically, some people in local government that are controlling their very own candidates. Remember, the whole purpose behind us going to a sheriff's office is to make us an independent body from any political influence, yet we have 111 building or government building characters that are funding their specific candidate. And their message continues to be, well, I am the only one that comes from a sheriff's office. No, I've been in a sheriff's office for 27 years. And here's the important thing. All of the constitutional responsibilities of the sheriff's office have always been intact, even when Buchanan went to jail, even when we went to an appointed position structure. And now even as we return, we've always been an elected we've always been a sheriff's office with the same constitutional responsibilities. We just couldn't call it a sheriff because we didn't have an independently elected sheriff. So we had to scratch out the name sheriff and put on police. So for the public and for the employees, the main 2 things that are going to be different is this. Number 1, you will pick who you want to be the sheriff, and all that responsibility is going to lay on the shoulders of that sheriff, not a politician. And number 2, the sheriff no longer reports to a politician. Other than that, everything else, the entire structure stays the same. They're going to hand over the keys to what is today known as the Miami-Dade Police Department headquarters, and it'll be the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office headquarters.
So the biggest thing that you're saying is that the transition in power is going to be smooth. It's going to be more transparent.
Yeah, I think obviously depending on who gets in office, right? Because you may have, there's some people in the race where, they're wild cards. We don't know. Some of them don't even have never even been a sergeant in a police department.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But they're raising a lot of money. So you have to start thinking. And I think the public needs to kind of do their own research. And by the way, be very skeptical of everything I say. treat me like a politician. I say this all the time. Treat me like a politician because I'm running for a political office now, right? So be very skeptical. Listen to what I'm saying, but fact check everything. Because there are, like I said, some people in the race that have never been police officers, have never had a supervisory rank in policing, yet they're raising a ton of money. And that kind of started when I said I'm bringing back a public corruption unit. Now, also equally as interesting is if we're trying to make the police department or the sheriff's office independent of any political influence, why are mayoral entities raising all the money for their candidates? I mean, just something to think about.
So you're telling me right now that the current mayor of Miami-Dade County is backing another person in office, which we assume that the mayor is selecting, backing up somebody they're competent enough to do the job, or she believes in fair competence that they can do it. The person that you're speaking about, are they an officer themselves, or?
Well, so yes, they and this is where terminology becomes important. Are they officers? Yes, corrections officers from Broward who've never worked in Miami-Dade until now.
So a Broward correction officer is running for Miami-Dade County and hasn't been out in the street,
has never stopped a car in his life, has never been to a domestic call, has never handled a narcotics investigation, has never been to a homicide, has never dealt with a homeless person out on the street, has never even responded to a loud music call. So these are things that have to make you say, wait a minute. If we have people in this race that not only know the department, know every level of the department, have been in every single corner of the department of Miami-Dade, and we have a Miami-Dade mayor, why would she be bringing someone from Broward who just started working here in Dade County a year ago and funding all of their campaign? It's something that I would want to think about if I were a voter.
How do you feel that the police force feels about that you bring somebody who gets elected who hasn't actually been in the field?
Right. Well, I'll say this. Most of the department, I can guarantee you, sees right through it. As a matter of fact, we had the Hispanic Police Officer Association. I got the endorsement from them several weeks ago. But the reason why that endorsement is meaningful to me is because that endorsement came from the men and women who did an election within the department. So they had a candidate forum, 12 candidates were there. We all did the same thing. We spoke about our vision and everything else. And when ballots went out, when they came back, I got more. I mean, it was an overwhelming victory. I got more than double the votes than the person that came in second place. So it was a little bit of a landslide. But that's to give you an example of these are men and women of all ranks within the Miami-Dade Police Department who know the deficiencies, they know the challenges of the agency, and they know my background and my history in the department. So that becomes really significant to me because other organizations didn't even let me speak. There's another organization who did an endorsement of the guy's best friend, and when I was going to go talk, because the city of Miami asked me to go talk over there, it was the FOP. The city of Miami, FOP, we spoke, let me go talk to them, and flat out was told by one of the delegates in that group, said, no, he will not talk. You will not let him in the building. And so they made the endorsement of their friend.
It's so interesting. So you're getting a Broward correction officer that's going to run for the most important position in Miami-Dade County, and that they're currently pushing for him. So essentially, you're telling me here, in between the lines, that they feel they can control them. And that they can tell them, hey, you know what, we want to go this way,
right? And
we're going to follow the same status quo that we've been following for years.
Well, it would be irresponsible for me to say that specifically. But it does lend itself to a lot of questions, doesn't it? When you're going to trust someone who, again, has never stopped a vehicle in his life, has never, done anything, but went up the ranks in Broward as a jailer, and then now comes over here and you have the mayor that brought you raising all the money for you, and you're basically the second wheel because the first director was the one receiving all that attention. He had an unfortunate incident. He had to step out of the race, and now all the attention is here, take everything we did before. It's comical to me. But I think, look, Miami-Dade voters are not blind. I think you cannot manufacture 27 years of, like I said, command, administrative, and operational experience. You can't make that up 3 months before the election. Some of the candidates are trying to do that, and I think it becomes pretty clear and evident when you ask the real questions. The questions that I would be asking: okay, what have you done? Who have you supervised? Where have you worked? What ranks have you had? Some of the politicians will tell you that rank is not important. Yeah, that generally comes from somebody who's never held a rank. Does that make sense?
So let me ask you this. Are they currently going to have, so these things are great. Mm-hmm. Are we going to have a debate for the sheriff position? That hasn't been done? Can that
Yeah, so we've had candidate forums. We haven't actually had a debate, but the candidate forums are a little bit of a disaster. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there's so many candidates that we cannot get to the, we can't get to the meat and potatoes. We can't get to the issues because they ask a question. There's so many candidates that the responses have to be within 60 seconds. Within 60 seconds, you're going through 12 people. So you've heard the same thing 3 times, 4 times. The other guy piggybacks something off he heard from the 5th. The 7th guy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and it gets to the point where the public will leave within an hour because it's boring. The candidate forums are very well-intentioned, but I don't think they're effective in getting to the meat and potatoes. So, and nobody will host a debate until the race just, people start dropping out and it's a little more manageable to hold a debate.
100%. I think that it's something that needs to be done. I think a debate will be great. If you make it towards the end of that race, which I'm pretty sure that you're going to make it there, mm-hmm. I would love to see you debate some of these professionals that are competing for this, because I want to know what the issue is. I want to know what's going on. And it's true. That 60-second little gap, I don't think it's not enough. I think you need to be in a setting where, similar to what we're doing here, we're getting into it, we're talking about it. Exactly. Because a 60-second soundbite's not going to tell you what that person's going to do for the next 4 to 8 years of their position.
Well, especially, I'm going to say this, it's comical, but I'm going to say it because it's absolutely true. On Instagram, I've posted about it. A lot of these candidates are repeating everything we've said, everything I've said. I even did a video calling it, we're going to have a little fun with this, #PlatformPirate, because I find it interesting that I'll say something and within 24 to 48 hours, you have another candidate repeating it almost verbatim, and it got to the point where even the department did it. The other day, look, we have a permitless carry law now that the governor signed. Well, permitless carry, basically what that means is that if you have the legal capabilities to carry a firearm, you no longer need a concealed weapons permit to carry it concealed. You can carry it with you, right? So if you legally own a weapon, you can carry it. Well, a lot of people are concerned, and myself am concerned about people's safety and manipulation skills when manipulating a firearm. So I said, you know what? We owe it to the residents of Dade County to open up our training bureau, to open it up on Saturdays and Sundays, and conduct firearm safety courses, not shooting courses. We're not teaching anybody how to shoot, but we can teach law, we can teach safety, and we can teach, cleaning and maintenance. And we owe it to the residents to do that, because I've walked over many dead bodies and injured people that have shot themselves by mistake or shot someone else by mistake because they didn't know what they were doing. So if we're going to make it a law where anybody can now carry it with you, I need to make sure that everybody that's carrying one has at least the opportunity to show up totally optional and totally free and learn from Miami-Dade Police Department or Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office instructors.
And that's something that we need to have, because we shouldn't be having these situations here. And I'm glad that you are bringing these issues up front, out of the darkness into the light. And before I wrap this up,
just real quick, by the way, what I was getting at, within 2 days, the police department put out the training and they followed my lead. So we're leading this campaign cycle, this election cycle for sure.
And that's the thing. A leader has to lead in the front. You have to be innovative. You have to be adaptive. And it's important that we have these discussions and that we are setting the precedence of what the future is going to be here, because if we don't talk about it, nothing's going to get done. Right. And I want to say thank you for bringing yourself over here. It was a pleasure speaking with you, potentially the next sheriff of Miami-Dade County.
So I do want to just end with, I am available to speak to anyone. As you know, we communicated, but I never once asked you what the interview was going to be about. I never asked you which way, if there's going to be guardrails.
100%. Very true.
And that's because this is the absolute most important election in Miami-Dade County in the last 60 years. If there's any election that's going to directly impact you and your family, this is going to be the election. So I agree with him. Treat me like a politician. Be very skeptical. Don't listen to anything I say. Fact check everything. But this is going to determine the forward trajectory of public safety in Miami-Dade County for the next at least 30 years. So do your investigation and remember me. You can follow me at Mario for Sheriff on Instagram and Mario Knapp for Sheriff on Facebook. Thank you.
And for those that are watching this video, I want to leave off with something very important here. Don't take anything that we're saying face value. Like Mario said, do your research, trust, but verify, do your homework, because at the end of the day, you may not think this is going to impact you, but it's going to impact you in many different ways, both financially, both mentally, and possibly spiritually. So if you enjoy this type of content, let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any ideas of what the future Miami will be, I would love to hear it. And what are you waiting for? Give us a follow.